folks, particularly for incidents involving women when the whole Justin Tucker deal went down. And here we are again. We're seeing a similar story unfold. This time, different sport, but the same scenario.
Mm-hmm.
You want to chime in, let me know how you feel about the subject itself? More than welcome to. Floor is yours.
Well, as a dad of 3 daughters and a granddaughter, um, it bothers me when you see violence on women like this, especially from athletes. Look, I mean, I understand people get into flare-ups, and look, there are women who do the same thing. So, but as a man, I hold men in a higher regard in that regard, because most of the times, men are supposed to be protectors. And putting your hands on a woman, no matter what, is unacceptable. I mean, I've always lived by a philosophy, and look, I've had women who've hit me, but I've been bigger than them, big and stronger than them, and what I usually do is I turn around and walk away. On occasion, I might tell them, look, you need to get away from me before it escalates and goes even further, and one of us really gets hurt, and it ain't going to be me. So, but in that regard, putting my hands on a woman, no, can't do it unless, I'm trying to defend somebody's life. That's a different story. But in these regard, you get upset, they say something, you know what? Turn around and walk away. And you know what? That's not the macho thing to do. You got to prove your manhood and so on and so forth. No, you don't. A real man knows how to turn around and walk away and not let things bother them like that, no matter what.
And ties into another point. That's a stigma that we as men need to stop pushing out about how we need to prove, quote unquote, prove ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We need to start to get away from that stigma and start to encourage more people to walk away. And that's a great point you brought up, because that ties into getting people away from it. Good morning. Good morning. And for talking about a guy here in Gervonta Tank Davis, who's had his 3rd different arrest in some way related to domestic battery. Not to mention he had an arrest in 2017 for a longtime childhood friend, but that's 3 different times. This is a situation of where there's smoke, there's fire. I understand sometimes he said, she said situations come out, more information proves it doesn't add up. It does happen, but in this case, nah. 3 different incidents coming out, no. That means he's doing something wrong. There's issues. Same thing with the Deshaun Watson situation or Ben Roethlisberger. Even though that's a different subject, but it still falls along similar lines of it. This is reoccurring. Something's going on. They're doing something wrong.
And if you're in a reoccurring situation, and that's a signal to, what, let's end the relationship no matter what. You know what? I mean, there is no intimate situation that's going to keep me locked into a divisive, a dysfunctional relationship like that. First of all, my peace of mind and my sanity is more important than any of that. So you know what? You do your thing, I'm gonna do my thing. We're both, you know what? We just can't be together. Plain and simple. And like you said, it's a recurrent thing. That's a red flag. Once, and I'm not even saying once, but I get it if it happens once. Once it starts happening over and over and over again, no, y'all need to separate. Plain and simple. Don't get around each other. Don't get involved with each other. You go one way, you go the other way, and that's it.
Absolutely. Right. And it's a shame that part of the problem is with professional athletes, they seem to get passes for it more frequently. And that's a factor in repeat offenders. Another example, that Josh Brown, the former kicker, when that happened, he got, for years, he kind of went quiet and under the rug till finally around 2016, it hit the mainstream and more people started to call it out, such as Teddy Bruschi. And that's another reason why the athletes need to be held accountable, or celebrities, period, not just athletes. Celebrities, same thing with other celebrities like Mel Gibson, another example. Charlie Sheen. So especially if you're rich and famous, it seems like a lot of people get away with it a lot more, and that's part of the problem. And
Well,
that
they do because a lot of times they throw money. The, on the flip side, yes, yes, they try to throw their money, but what about the people accepting the money? Because now you're saying it's okay when you accept the money, as opposed to no, you need to go to court and you need to be held accountable. Then once you go to court, if you want to take civil actions, then to me you're justified. When somebody comes at you and wants to put money on the table right off the bat, mm-mm, mm-mm, mm-mm. It's a crime. You need to be held accountable.
definitely, and it's about time they start being held accountable. Is there any other thoughts on this subject before we switch helms?
No, I think we've covered everything.
All right. So moving on, we're going to start with the subject that inspired me to make this stream about the growth of women's sports. On Friday night on Netflix, you had junior welterweight women's Katie Taylor and Amanda Serino had their third fight, and it passed the 2.6 million mark with views on Netflix, on which was the first all women's card. So then that inspired me to think about it. We've been seeing in recent years, first starting with that example, but also the rise of March Madness's ratings, the rise of the WNBA's ratings, mainly off the backs of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, that we're starting to see a growth in women's sports in popularity. I got a few reasons, I think, some factors that play into it. For starters, like take Katie Taylor, Amanda Serino. Their styles of boxing kind of resembled more the old school, exciting style that fans prefer. Where in recent years, some of the big draws like Floyd Money Mayweather wasn't exactly the most appealing boxing style for fans that like that old school slug it out style. For that provides an alternative with Taylor and Serino, especially being that they were on the second fight was on the undercard of Mike Tyson, Jake Paul with a ton of viewers. It opened the window of opportunity for them to headline a card months later, and that's exactly what happened. Or even the NBA, for example, you see the style of play. There are some fans that aren't really the biggest fans of it, like particularly the flopping, the falling down. And now you see at college level, a lot of men placate to that style trying to get to the NBA, but the women's, they play differently. I was seeing the highlights through March Madness this year, and I noticed oftentimes the women's games, it was a lot more of a physical style 9 times out of 10 when I check out the highlights. And then you also got the women stay longer, so that gives fans more time to connect with the players. I mean, obviously, you're a follower of the WNBA. You do WNBA content, so I turn the floor over to you. What do you believe are some of the main factors?
Well, true basketball purists, some, because there are some who, they just don't want to follow the women's game, period. But if you really follow the women's game, you get into it, it's a lot more fundamentally sound. You don't always have women who are trying to do highlight dunks and all of that type of stuff. Now, there are women that dunk. There's a young lady in France who they just did a video on that got a breakaway and went up and dunked it, right off of one leg, took it with one hand and slammed it down. So impressive. But most of them, they don't do that. They work on the backdoor cuts. They work on movement. Do they take 3-pointers? Yes. That's part of the game, just like in the men's game. But the ability to spread it out. You have them also attack the paint. You have players who play with their backs to the basket, where in the men's game you really don't see that anymore. If you take a Brittany Griner, yes, she's taller than pretty much everyone in the WNBA at 6'8", 6'9", but she does a good job putting her back to the basket, taking a dribble, going over her left shoulder or her right shoulder, and putting the basket putting the basketball in the net. So these are some of the things that I really like, and that's one of the reasons why I've appreciated the women's game going all the way back to my high school days. I mean, my high school girls team was a very good team, and we used to go there and support it, and that's where my love of the women's game started. Because I saw the difference between the men's game and the women's game. Some people say it's not as physical. Oh, it's physical in the women's game. Believe you me, they set those hard screens and, they get into each other's face on occasion. But the one thing that happens in the women's game, they let it go at the end of the game. That's the one thing. They don't carry it over, and very rarely you don't see that. You see them hugging each other after the game, which that tells you that they know how to let the emotions go. But in terms of playing the game, I mean, it's fundamentally sound. That's why I love this game so much, as a purist, because it's fundamental. Backdoor cuts, good screens, spacing, getting the basketball into the lane, getting good touches into the paint to the kickouts. There's so many different things, in the women's game that I appreciate. And shout out to Caitlin Clark. I understand she's the big draw, and a lot of people will gravitate towards her. A lot of people don't like Angel Reese. I'm one that supports Angel Reese. I love her. I love her game. It's as far as a player, I'm not a basketball player, never was good, but she's rugged, she's rough, but she's very smart. She has good handles. People want to kill her for the me bounds, but look, I've always argued that's something that started in the men's game. It's not like she created it. I go back to Moses Malone, and yeah, I've heard the arguments. Oh, well, he just did that on occasion just for his stats. Whatever the reason, the point is he's done it, and so have a lot of other men in the NBA who have done it. She's just following the trend in terms of the basketball. And look, and when you're getting 17 to 20 rebounds in a game, it's not just her throwing it up and going to get her own rebounds. There's other things that she's doing. But if you want to argue that, she's getting her own rebounds, where's the other players on the other team coming to fight her for it? So whatever it is, you don't like her play, fine, no problem, I get it. Me, I appreciate her play, kind of like an old Charles Oakley, Anthony Mason, Sean Kemp, those type of players who, were gritty, rugged, that's it. And you know what? It's the contrast between the two players, because in the end, people do want to see that. They do want to see the contrast, who's going to win, who's going to get it, this week, this game, so on and so forth. So I mean, again, I can sit here and talk for hours, which I will later on today, about the NBA, the WNBA. I just love the game. And look, I know people want to say it's, oh, coach, it's because the ladies are pretty. Yeah, they're pretty, but I don't watch the game just because of their looks. I watch the game for the purity of how they play it.
And then there's a plug for later. You got show coming up.
The real full court press. I know the WNBA has a show called that, but they came on after we started this on the Hardcore Sports Network a while ago. So we're doing another episode today, 7:00, right here on the Hardcore Sports Network on my channel on the ABSN. So, and with my co-host, the Man Cave and Leaf Diggy. Randy, love you, brother. You always got a place whenever you're ready to come back.
Right, so check it out. The Full Court Press, Coach Ed Gladney later today. Coming up, and there were some interesting points he brought up. You talked about, compared Caitlin Clark's style to some of the old school NBA players. And that ties into part of the reason why more people are leaning toward it. Because you got now that tells that, hey, Caitlin Clark and some Angel Reese, all these WNBA players to some degree are having their game influenced by the old school NBA players. They grew up on some of them, watching their highlights. That played a factor into their game and how they developed and crafted their game at the professional level. So there's that crossover appeal there with some of the more old school fans. And you said sometimes with players, they go out there, they play physical, gets competitive, but as soon as the game's over, it's over. You see a big physical hit in the NBA, 9 times out of 10 in today's era, there's a whole big shouting contest and a scuffle moments afterward. I mean, how many times have we seen these fights over the years, especially? I mean, we've always seen fights in basketball. That's nothing new, but We've
Mm-hmm.
seen in recent years it starts over something small. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Isaiah Stewart from the Detroit Pistons, how many times has he gotten into it?
Exactly. Exactly. And that you talked about earlier, the repetition, when, the gentleman with his lady, it's the same thing here. When you're a player that you're constantly getting into it, now you have that type of reputation. And guess what? The officials now looking at you in a different eye. You got to be smart. Look, you don't want to get these stupid fouls sometimes, or you want to get the benefit of the doubt. Hey, things happen. We complain about in the NBA, oh, he's getting away with, this or that. Yeah, sometimes it happens in the WNBA. I saw a video clip of Caitlin Clark where literally she walked, but for the most part, the ladies, the referees, they call it fair across the board. So, but yeah, when you get a reputation as, type of player who's, continuously getting into fights and you're overly aggressive in the NBA, yeah, you're looked at differently. Not in the WNBA. I haven't seen where they say, "Oh, these players are, this is a dirty player," and they're giving fouls that they don't deserve. Usually it's fair across the board.
And you're listening to people that actively watch and follow the WNBA, not like
Hmm.
sometimes where a foul happens on Caitlin Clark and you get people that don't even really watch the game, only check out one or two highlights, make a big
Hmm.
deal out of it, like you're
Hmm.
watching an NBA game.
Hmm.
It's great. You're coming from a much different perspective than people that don't actually follow. And then you talk about referees. We've seen in the NBA, stars particularly get the benefit of the doubt, and some like LeBron James, particularly with traveling over the years, seems
Hmm.
to get the
Hmm.
benefit of the doubt a lot of times. And when was the last time you remember their NBA's poster boy fouling out of a game?
I don't. I don't. I really
Exactly.
don't. So but I mean, you're right. The superstars very rarely, are they, because, and I understand why the NBA is doing that, because they understand that's sometimes why fans are coming in. So fans are culpable in the product. I'm gonna be honest with you. If you didn't support the product, and less you don't think they're going to change. I make that argument with my Knicks. You know, People complained about the Knicks for 20 plus years, but you're selling out every game. As much as I can't stand the owner, I understand the business side of it. If people are going to pay for what's out there, whether it's good or not, I'm not changing anything because you're still giving me the money. But when you don't have people on TV watching, you don't have the butts in the seats, paying for the tickets, paying for merchandising, and all this other stuff, then you know what, an owner is going to change the way they approach it. So, and that's why I understand why the NBA does what they want to do. They don't want their superstars fouling out. But I've seen in the W, I've seen Sabrina Ionescu foul out. I've seen Breonna Stewart foul out. I've seen Brittany Griner foul. I mean, I've seen all the superstars foul out of a game at least one time. So that's why I say it's fair across the board. And it doesn't matter who you are. It could be Nafisa Kala with the Lynx. One of the top players in the league. Yeah, she gets called for her fouls. Sometimes they all question the referees. Every player, it don't matter if it's the NBA, WNBA, college, whatever, high school. Everybody questions the referees, and I know some fans don't like it, but as a former coach and a former player, you do that because you're trying to get in the referee's ear to get them to fall and feel sorry for you and play on their human emotions. And then you know what? Maybe next time I'll get the benefit of the doubt, or my player will get the benefit of the doubt. That part I don't that doesn't phase me anymore, like everyone else, unless you got a player who's sitting there arguing with the referee and the play is going down the other way and the other team scores on you and you're sitting back there yelling and crying to the referee. Then I'm like, get your butt back over and down court and play. I don't see that in the WNBA. They might chirp with the referees running down the court, but they're running down the court to get back and help their teammates. So Um, Again, these are some of the things that has drawn me to the WNBA since day one. I've been there since 1997, um, when the Liberty and the Sparks jumped out. Lisa Leslie and Rebecca Lobo had the ceremonial first jump. I mean, I've been following since day one. I just, like I said, I love the sport. Always love the sport. I appreciate the growth of the sport. Like with Portland, their announcement today with Toronto coming in. Who's it? Toronto. You got Golden State this year. You have Toronto, Cleveland, Philly. You guys are getting a team.
Yep.
Portland is getting a team. Who am I forgetting? I'm forgetting. It's three teams. Yes, Cleveland, Detroit. Sorry, Detroit is the other one that's coming back. Cleveland and Detroit used to have teams in the WNBA, so now they're coming back. Portland actually did too, but they were in the I think the ABL. That was a different women's league. So, Nick, do I think she's overrated? Um, it In terms of what way? She's a gritty player. I love Sophia Cunningham's game. I'm going to be honest with you. She's a dirty work type of player. She's going to set the hard screens. She's going to move consistently. She shoots the three very well. So again, she has a rough and tuggy type of attitude. So in that regard, no. Is she a superstar in the W? No, she's not. I don't think I've never heard or seen anything that considers her a superstar. They just consider her a good player who's a dirty work type of player who's going to do all the little things, dive on the floor well, they all do. I don't care if you're a superstar, but you get my point. She's not too good to get on the ground and get some knee and elbow burns, in that regard. So, and hey, look, she don't back down from anyone. So, but yes, she's a role player. She's definitely a very good role player. She was phenomenal in Phoenix, and she's doing pretty good over there with Indiana. Even though I can't stand Indiana, but that's a different story. But yeah, she does well over there, and I'm glad to see her back from injury. So her and Hull, they're kind of the same. Lexi Hull are pretty much kind of the same type of players. Hull's just a little bit taller, but they do the dirty work. So and they're great role players. So
They're gonna get Coach answering Nick's question, and now this I did a poll both on Twitter/X and my channel about women's sports in general. Now that we've seen last year, I put it down. We had the March Madness 2024 National Championship. South Carolina, Iowa would average 18.7 million viewers across ABC and ESPN. And then that raises the question with that, and then the 2.6 plus million with the Katie Taylor, Amanda Serino boxing fight on Netflix. Are we going to see over the next, say, 3, 4, 5 years, women's sports as a whole, particularly basketball with college pros, looks like women's boxing being the main two, are we going to see a continued increase in popularity and a rise over the next coming years? Because with the WNBA, you have Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark rivalry has already got a spark going to keep that push of popularity, similar to a Johnson and Bird. Not that it's necessarily going to surpass the NBA, but it could certainly help. You think we're going to see that?
The women's game is going to continue to grow because you're getting you're getting a larger influx of talent into the game. I mean, you got Lauren Betts with UCLA, who's probably going to be the #1 draft pick. You got whatchamacallit out at USC, who hurt her knee. Oh, why did I forget her name? Juju Watkins, sorry. She's coming out, and like I said, you got the young girl over at France. You have a lot of international players who are coming into the league. What it's doing is also it's inspiring young girls to go out and play basketball and go out and develop their skills. Look, Caitlin Clark has inspired a lot of young girls to go out and work on their shooting. because they like that, they they want to do that. I always make the argument, people gravitate towards her, and they are amazed by her 3-point shooting, but Sabrina Ionescu was doing the same thing when she was coming out of Oregon. I mean, she was shooting the deep threes, and she was more of a triple threat because she could also give you the assist, but she could also go and get the rebounds. And her mentor, which some fans didn't know, was the late great Kobe Bryant. He used to take her under his wing, and he used to talk to her about the mentality and whatever, and she speaks to that. And but again, Caitlin Clark is starting to learn that about the WNBA. I give her credit. She sees that. She's worked on her body getting stronger. And that's what happens when they first come in. You start to see the speed and how strong the players are. So you have to step up your game, and she is doing that. So and other young girls, when they go, in the AAU circuit and they get into high school, then they go to college, same thing. The only thing that I would wish the NBA does that the W doesn't. The NBA, you got to go to college for 1 year. The NBA, you have to. I mean, WNBA is 3 years minimum. So that's the only difference. But it allows the women to develop and get more physically developed, getting into the game. So again, you're seeing younger girls want to play basketball now. Not just, back in the days, it was always about soccer or gymnastics. Now they're getting into basketball. You just talked about boxing. You're going to see a certain level of girls who get into boxing for whatever reason, whether it's for self-defense, or self-esteem. But and that's the thing that I love about sports as a whole, but I love for girls being involved in sports because it helps them with their self-esteem. Going further, once they're done playing, these women go into businesses, go into different things. Some become mothers, but you see their self-esteem, which then trickles down and helps others, whether it's in a business world or whether it's your children, whatever the case may be. So it's something that I appreciate. And like I said, I love the women's game. I'm a big supporter, have always been. It's not about, like I said, it's not about the sexual appeal, as a man. It's more about the purity of the game and the beauty of the game, like that. And again, like I said, I got 3 daughters, so it's like, if they see me, in a sense, always sexualizing women, then, it would affect their self-esteem. But, if you see that, you appreciate the beauty, and don't get me wrong, there's flirting and all that other stuff. That's life, but they also understand and appreciate that. So, and that's what I, appreciate about the women's game. So thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. Yeah, and the women's sports are more fundamentally sound. I can't even tell you in football. What most people don't know, I've coached women's football, and the women, while they are not as athletically gifted as the men in the physical, full contact, full equipment game, but they're more fundamentally sound. And they take that to a different level, because men, you take it for granted. A lot of times you rely on your athleticism, where women just want to, work on that. Yeah, Nick, that was one of my teams that I owned, the Jersey Shore Hurricanes. So, but yeah, the women are a lot more fundamentally sound, and it doesn't matter what level of sport that they play. So, and that's why I appreciate it. I've even seen girls in wrestling, whether they're wrestling boys or they're wrestling other girls, they are a lot more fundamentally sound, and guys, our ego gets in our way when we're competing against a woman or a girl, and they know that, and they use that to their advantage. So, semi-pro, I've gone up against a woman before, and yeah, the ego came out, and I'm like, I'm not letting the woman make me look stupid. So, but it takes you out of your character and doing what you need to do while they're fundamentally staying within the confine of playing the sport. So.
Hey, it looks like we covered the main subjects I wanted to cover. Is there anything else you want to add to it?
I mean, you like I say, you could talk. I could talk about the women's game. Yeah, I don't want to monopolize it. So, I mean, if you got anything else you want to, you know, introduce, I mean, like I said, I could talk the women's game for hours. The WNBA, like I said, just going over it. The way they play, the purity of the game. The fundamentals that they bring to the game. Um, I mean, I even like the Unrivaled, which just came out, this year, and I'm looking forward to. It's the 3-on-3 basketball, started by Nafisa Collar and Brianna Stewart, and I just love it. It started out small and intimate, but you're going to see more and more teams get, more and more players get involved. It keeps the women here because that's the other thing about the WNBA. It's about the salary. They don't get as much as you get in the NBA. I mean, we got guys now getting $70 million. The most you can get in the WNBA is like 270,000. That's a big discrepancy. You
Huge.
know, Yes. Now, there are people going to argue, well, you don't have the fan support. That's where the money comes from. I get it. I understand. But as the game continues to grow, I'm looking forward to that because these women, most of these women, I'm not talking about the stars of the league. I'm talking about the true meat and potatoes of the WNBA. They have to go overseas to play. Now they can get $1 million overseas, but you can't get $1 million in the WNBA here. Now in the Unrivaled, they're making more money for playing a shorter period of time in a 3-on-3 environment. So, but the WNBA is increasing. They went to 44 games this year, which is I think they're adding on 4 or 6 more games. I forgot what the number, but you're still adding on, but you haven't increased the salaries. Now they're going into a CBA aspect, so after the season they have to negotiate. So hopefully, I hope they can get a contract worked out. So that way we can continue to see it. But that's why I love the Unrivaled. You're keeping a lot of the women here. They're making the money. They can be around their family and friends. They play the Unrivaled in one location down in Miami. Who wouldn't want to go down to Miami in a January and February to watch some basketball? And some of the things that they're doing that they've introduced, child care, certain medical protections, that they've introduced for the women. I would love for them to transition over to the NBA. I mean, the WNBA. There's some playing rules that I would love that, but that's just my little pet peeve. But I just love the beauty of the game, whether it's the WNBA or the Unrivaled, the college game with the women's. I'm a big Rutgers Scarlet Knight fan, and Keene, my college that I played in college back in the day. I follow them religiously, and Big Ten basketball, I follow it now. Even more now it's spread out from coast to coast. But I love seeing the growth of the game. Caitlin Clark, for everything. She played in the Big Ten. Iowa is in the Big Ten, so she's bringing that brand. And hopefully more and more girls will gravitate to the Big Ten, so it can become the best college basketball league in the women at the women's level. So again, like I said, I could talk the women's game for talk your ear off. So
All right, Coach. I appreciate you coming on here, sharing your perspective about mainly the WNBA, college, women's sports. And
mhm.
after listening to what you had to say, it gave me a fresh perspective that I didn't think about before. It gave me more insight to check out the highlights. Maybe eventually watch a full game at some point.
Here's one more thing I want to tell the people out there too. The WNBA has a season pass. It's $34. That's the cheapest season pass that's out there in comparison to all the other pro sports. So just saying, I get to see a lot of the games, and I just love it. So I appreciate it. So yeah, Arco, I heard about that episode. I never got to see it, so I got to go check it out. But
Alrighty,
yeah,
so with
there you go. I'm sorry, Nick.
Yep. So with that being said, I think we covered everything we wanted to. Coach, thank you for coming on. It was an honor to have you here. It's a fun show. And everyone that stopped by in the chat, Nick, Arku, Mitch, thanks for stopping by in the chat. You're the reason we as content creators get to do this. So with that being said, hope you have a great rest of your day. Same with you as well, Coach.
You too.
Coach Ed Gladney signing off. See you soon.